Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Today, we're taking you somewhere that, well, it feels like it shouldn't exist. Imagine a new Jerusalem, but built on a remote Italian mountainside. It's this fortress, see, built to fight the Protestant Reformation, but not with soldiers.
With what then?
With thousands of life-size terracotta statues wearing actual clothes, and human hair wigs.
Wow.
It's a place where, according to legend, roasted chickens literally come back to life to judge drunkards, where statues of the Virgin Mary slap thieves across the face, and where a totally forgotten Flemish genius named Tabachetti created scenes so chaotically, so grotesquely real that they make Michelangelo look like he was just showing off.
So we're diving into Samuel Butler's Voto to explore this place, the Sacro Monte of Varallo.
That's the one.
That is quite an introduction. So we're talking about art today, but this doesn't sound like the kind of polite, hands-off art you see in a museum.
No, not at all. This is something else. It's gritty, it's theatrical, it just completely blurs the line between what's real and what's a stage play. And the best part is, we're seeing it all through the eyes of a man who was, he was equal parts obsessed fan and biting cynic.
Samuel Butler.
Samuel Butler himself, you probably know him from the satire Erewhon, but here we're digging into his travel book, his art critique, Ex Voto, and honestly, even calling it an art critique feels way too dry.
It's more than that.
It's a rescue mission. Butler is on a crusade to save the reputation of these artists that the world has totally ignored. And in doing that, he ends up giving us this really fascinating meditation on the difference between, technical soulless perfection and genuine, messy human sincerity.
Okay, so let's get our bearings. Where are we exactly? We're not in Rome. We're not in Florence.
No, not at all. We are way up north. We're in the Piedmont region of Italy in a town called Varallo-Sesia.
Right.
And you have to picture the geography because it's absolutely crucial to the whole story. We're in the subalpine valleys, so the air is crisp, the scenery is just spectacular, and Butler opens the book by painting this picture of a town that's very much alive. He says, the climate is healthy, but then he adds, with that classic Butler wit, that for all the pilgrims coming to save their souls, the town also offers plenty of sensual and pleasing commodities.
He mentions the wine and the trout, doesn't he?
He does. Excellent wine, trout, game. And that contrast is so important. Down in the valley, you've got life. You have the flesh pots, the comforts. But looming right above the town is the Sacro Monte, the sacred mountain.
It's separate.
It's physically separate from all that, from the daily grind. This isn't a church you just pop into for Sunday Mass.
Yeah.
It's a destination. It's a place you have to climb.
And Butler has this really great analogy for it. He doesn't call it a complex or a sanctuary. He calls it a book.
Yes, and I think that is the absolute key to understanding the whole thing. He sees the mountain as a physical text. You start at the bottom, and each chapel on this winding path up the mountain is a chapter, or maybe a page. A page in what story? The life of Christ. Right. The entire thing is designed to illustrate it chronologically. You start with the fall of man, you go through the nativity, the life of Jesus, and it culminates in the passion and the resurrection. You don't read this book, you walk it.
But there's a political angle here, too, isn't there? It wasn't just built for, pious exercise. This is where the history gets really juicy.
Oh, absolutely. You have to look at when it was built. The Sacro Monte was founded in the late 1400s, but the huge expansion, the real building boom, happened right when the world was being turned upside down. We're in the foothills of the Alps, so what's on the other side of those mountains?
That would be Northern Europe, Germany, Switzerland.
Precisely. And in the early 16th century, you have these ideas pouring over the mountain passes that absolutely terrified the Catholic Church.
The Reformation.
The Reformation was gaining steam. You have Luther, later you have Calvin, and what are they doing? They're dismantling the whole visual language of Christianity.
Right, the iconoclasm. They're smashing statues, painting over frescoes, arguing that all these images are a form of idolatry. They want to shift the focus completely to the Word, the text of the Bible.
So if you're the church in Rome, and you've got this heresy, as you see it, pressing down from the north, what's your move? You don't just write a pamphlet in response, you build a fortress. And Butler calls the Sacro Monte a spiritual frontier fortress. It was designed literally to hold these subalpine valleys for Rome.
It's like a psychological counterattack. The reformers are saying images are bad, statues are lies, and Varallo's response is, oh yeah, watch this. We're going to build 40-something chapels filled with thousands of life-size, super realistic statues acting out the entire Bible in 3D.
It's doubling down in the most spectacular way you can imagine. It's a visual, physical, tangible statement of Catholic doctrine. and is placed right on the border. If the Reformation was all about the abstract word, Varallo was about the visceral emotional experience.
Making you feel it.
Exactly, making you feel the religion so intensely that the intellectual arguments of the Protestants would just bounce right off you.
So let's talk about the man behind this. I mean, who has this idea? Who wakes up one day and decides, I'm going to build a new Jerusalem on a cliff?
That would be a man named Bernardino Caimi. He was a friar, and this is the most important part of his resume. He had been the patriarch of the Holy Land.
So he'd actually been there.
He had lived in Jerusalem. He walked the Via Dolorosa. He had seen the Holy Sepulchre with his own eyes.
Which in the late 1400s was not, a simple vacation. That was a dangerous, expensive, probably life-threatening journey.
Incredibly difficult. You had the cost, the risk of disease, pirates being captured. For your average Italian peasant or even a merchant, going to Jerusalem was a complete fantasy. It was impossible. So Caimi's motivation was actually very practical and, in a way, quite charitable.
He wanted to bring Jerusalem to them?
He wanted to reproduce the Holy Land on Italian soil, to democratize the pilgrimage.
So everyone could get the spiritual benefits without the risk of being shipwrecked.
That's it, exactly. He wanted to build a facsimile so accurate, so convincing, that the spiritual payout would be the same as the real thing.
Butler respects the ambition, you can tell. But he has so much fun with the founding myths of the place. He's a skeptic through and through, and he just can't resist poking holes in these miraculous origin stories.
Oh, Butler loves to dissect a good miracle. And there are two main legends about the founding of Varallo. The first is that Caimi was led to the exact spot on the mountain by the song of a bird.
A divine bird, I assume.
A bird singing with extraordinary sweetness, according to the official story. Now, Butler, of course, being a naturalist as well as a critic, he pauses the narrative to consider this, and he just says, well, it's probably a blue rock thrush.
Alas.
Yeah.
He identifies the species.
He does. He says they're quite common in that area, and they have a lovely song. He just, poof, strips the magic away and replaces it with ornithology. But his real skepticism, his real wit, comes out with a second story, the story of the miraculous stone.
The conveniently located stone.
It's almost too convenient. The story goes that when Caimi and his men started digging the foundation for the very first chapel, which was going to be the Holy Sepulchre, their shovels hit a rock. And lo and behold, this rock was an exact replica of the stone that covered the real Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem.
What are the odds of that?
Butler would say 0. Absolute 0. He points out with his wonderful dry sarcasm how immensely lucky it was to find the one stone you needed to prove that this specific mountain was the divinely chosen New Jerusalem.
He makes a comparison, doesn't he?
He does. It's a great one. He compared the resemblance between Varallo and Jerusalem to the resemblance between Monmouth and Macedon.
That's Shakespeare. That's from Henry V.
It is. The Welsh captain, Llewellyn, he's trying to prove that Henry V is like Alexander the Great. And his whole argument is that one was born in Monmouth and the other in Macedon. And there is a river in Macedon, and there is also, moreover, a river at Monmouth.
Which means the connection is completely superficial and basically made up.
Totally made up. And that's Butler telling us, look, I love this place, I'm obsessed with it, but let's not kid ourselves. This was stage managed from day one. Caimi needed a sign to legitimize his massive, expensive project, so a sign was duly found. Butler sees the theatricality, the business side of sanctity right from the beginning.
And that theatricality isn't just in the origin story, it's baked into the art form itself. We really need to explain what it's like to look into one of these chapels, because just saying statues and paintings does not do it justice.
No, it really doesn't. It's this mixed medium that's almost unique to this part of the world. So you walk up to a chapel. The front is usually open to the elements, but it's protected by a big iron grill or a screen. So you have to peer inside.
You can't go in.
You can't go in. You're the audience. And the floor of the chapel, the stage, is populated with these terracotta figures, all of them life-size.
And they're not just plain clay sculptures.
Oh, no. They are fully polychrome, painted to look like living, breathing flesh. And they are dressed. They wear actual fabric clothes robes, tunics, armor, hats. And then there's the detail that, for a modern eye, is maybe the most disturbing.
The wigs.
The wigs. They often have wigs made of real horsehair.
It sounds like a wax museum, but from 500 years ago.
It creates a sensation that is very, very close to what we now call the uncanny valley. When the light is dim or you just catch a glimpse through the grill for a split second, they look terrifyingly real. But the real artistic trick, the thing that makes it so immersive,
Mm.
is how the statues integrate with the walls behind them.
The frescoes.
Exactly. Behind the 3D statues, the walls are painted with more figures, with crowds of people, with landscapes. And the great artists, the ones who were masters of this, they managed to blur the line perfectly. So you'll have a full terracotta statue in the foreground, then maybe a statue in slightly lower relief just behind it, and then a painted figure on the wall that looks just as round and solid as the statue.
So you can't tell where the sculpture ends and the painting begins.
You genuinely can't. It's an immersive diorama, a kind of 16th century virtual reality
Mm.
designed to completely trick your eye.
And Butler defends this, right? Because I imagine a lot of, serious art critics would find this tacky.
Oh, they did. Butler knows that high-minded critics think it's just awful. He knows that dressing statues in real clothes is considered barbaric by the standards of the Academy, but he argues that's missing the point. The goal here wasn't art with a capital A. The goal was effectiveness.
He uses that theater analogy again.
He does. He says these artists were playing to the pit, as well as the boxes. They needed to reach the illiterate peasant who walked all the way up that mountain on his knees just as much as they needed to impress the educated nobleman. They weren't trying to create a beautiful object to be studied in a gallery. They were trying to create a scene to be experienced.
But in defending this, he basically declares war on the art establishment of his own time. And this brings us to the villain of the story. Because every good hero needs a villain, and for Samuel Butler, that villain was Sir Henry Layard.
Sir Henry Layard is the perfect archetype of the Victorian academic snob. He was a famous archaeologist, a politician, and most importantly, he edited the standard handbook on Italian painting. He was the ultimate gatekeeper of taste.
And what did you think of Varallo?
He didn't see genius.
Yeah.
He saw kitsch. He looked at it and was just repulsed.
He used a specific phrase, didn't he? A phrase that really got under Butler's skin.
He called the terracotta figures repugnant to a cultivated eye.
Repugnant. That's a strong word.
It's visceral. But it's the second part of that phrase, a cultivated eye, that really drives Butler mad. It just reeks of snobbery. Layard is judging Varallo by the standards of the high Renaissance masters, Raphael, Michelangelo. He's looking for idealized beauty, perfect anatomy, the noble quiet of white marble.
And instead he finds screaming faces, mangy horsehair wigs, and characters with goiters.
Exactly. But this is where we get to the absolute core of Butler's entire philosophy, and I think this is the most important idea in the whole book.
Yeah.
Butler introduces this distinction using two Greek terms, agape and gnosis.
Love and knowledge.
Right. Gnosis is knowledge. It's technique. It's knowing the rules of perspective, knowing exactly how a bicep attaches to a shoulder, knowing how to carve a marble toga so it drapes perfectly. Sir Henry Layard loves gnosis. The Academy loves gnosis.
And agape is now.
Agape is love. It's spirit. It is sincerity. It's the burning desire to communicate an emotion or tell a story, whether you follow all the rules or not. And Butler argues that the academic art of his time, and maybe even the art of someone like Raphael, had become all gnosis and no agape.
All head and no heart.
Perfectly put. Technically perfect, but spiritually dead. He calls it soulless perfection.
Whereas the artists at Varallo, even if they were a bit rough and ready, were just overflowing with agape.
Yes. Butler would much rather look at a statue that has a slightly incorrect arm, but a face that is just full of genuine human anguish than a technically perfect cold statue that clearly feels nothing at all. He champions what he calls sincere incompetence over soulless perfection.
He champions the grotesque.
Because the grotesque is often where the truth lives. Real people are grotesque. We have wrinkles and double chins and missing teeth, and we make awkward expressions. Varallo captures that flawed, messy humanity.
It's like the difference between a pop song that's been auto-tuned and produced to within an inch of its life. So it's technically flawless, but totally forgettable.
Right.
And a singer with a scratchy voice and a slightly out-of-tune guitar who just sings a song that breaks your heart.
That is the perfect analogy. Butler is the world's biggest fan of the guy with the scratchy voice.
So let's meet the band. Who are the actual artists who created this rock opera on a mountain?
Okay, so the first major figure, the one who really set the tone, is Gaudenzio Ferrari.
He's the local boy.
He is, born and raised right there in the Val-Sesia. Butler calls him the Raphael of the Valley, but then he immediately adds that Gaudenzio was actually stronger and more sincere than Raphael ever was.
High praise.
It is. Gaudenzio is the one who really mastered the style of the Sacro Monte. He was both a painter and a sculptor, which is rare. You're usually one or the other. But Gaudenzio could do both, which is what allowed him to create that seamless 3D effect we were talking about.
And his masterpiece is Chapel 38, the Crucifixion. And just the scale of this thing is mind-boggling.
It's absolutely epic. Butler claims, and he might be right, that it's the most ambitious work of art ever attempted by a single man. We are not talking about a quiet painting with 5 or 6 figures here. We are talking about a full-on crowd scene with around 150 figures.
150.
Yes, a mix of statues and painted figures all blended together. It's a mob. You have the 3 crosses rising above it all, of course, but down on the ground, it is pure chaos. You've got Roman soldiers on horseback. You've got weeping women, gambling soldiers, children, dogs, thieves being dragged along. It captures the noise and the spit and the confusion of the event. It's not a sanitized holy icon. It's a public execution.
And Butler, being Butler the detective, he thinks he spots some familiar faces in that crowd.
He loves hunting for hidden portraits. He's absolutely convinced that Gaudenzio painted himself into the fresco as an old man looking on with a critical eye.
Sure.
But the real bombshell is his theory that Gaudenzio also included a portrait of Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo, what would he be doing in a chapel in the Alps?
Well, it sounds a bit like a Dan Brown novel, but it's not historically impossible. Leonardo was working in Milan for years, which isn't that far away. Gaudenzio would have certainly known his work, and it's plausible they could have met. Butler points to this one specific figure in the painted crowd.
And what does he look like?
He's described as having a bold stoutness, which is an old way of saying a bold, sturdy presence. He has a long white beard and this searching, eager, intellectual face.
And Butler says, that's him. That's Leonardo.
He argues that it was Gaudenzio paying homage to the great genius of the age. And whether it's true or not, it shows you how highly Butler rates Gaudenzio. He thinks Gaudenzio belongs in that same conversation. He even quotes an old art theorist named Lamasso, who called Gaudenzio a profound philosopher, and said he understood the motions of the mind better than almost anyone.
Meaning he could show what a character was thinking and feeling, just through their expression and body language.
Exactly. Emotional intelligence, but rendered in paint and clay.
But as much as Butler admires Gaudenzio, he isn't the real hero of the book, is he? The book Ex Voto is really a crusade to resurrect the name of another artist entirely. A man Butler thinks has been completely, unjustly erased from history.
Yes. The true hero of the book is Tabbachetti.
Now, Tabbachetti sounds very Italian. But Butler did the legwork, he dug into the archives, and he found out that wasn't his real name at all.
Not even close. Tabbachetti was a local nickname. His real name was Jean de Wespin. He wasn't Italian at all. He was Flemish. He came from a town called Dinant in what is now Belgium.
So how does a guy named Jean de Wespin end up being called Tabbachetti in Italy?
It's basically a game of historical telephone.
Yeah.
The locals couldn't pronounce his French name, or they just Italianized it. His family had a nickname back home, Tabagay, which might have related to a trade or a family quirk. And over time, Tabagay just morphed into Tabbachetti.
And the de Wespin family, they had a very specific trade back in Belgium, didn't they? They weren't sculptors.
No, they were copper beaters. They were metal workers. And Butler finds this absolutely fascinating. He argues that coming from this lineage of men who hammered and shaped metal gave Tabbachetti a completely different approach to sculpture. He wasn't delicately chipping away at stone. He was building form with force. His work has this structural integrity, a robustness that feels almost metallic and powerful.
There's also this tragic, romantic story that built up around him. The local legend said he went mad. Or
Yes, the classic mad artist trope. The story that was told in Varallo for centuries was that Tabbachetti created these unbelievable masterpieces and then just lost his mind. Or another version is that he was poisoned by jealous Italian rivals who just couldn't handle his genius. It's all very dramatic.
Does Butler believe any of it?
Not really. Butler's a rationalist. He's not interested in romantic myths. He goes through the contracts, the legal documents, the payment records, and he concludes that Tabbachetti most likely just suffered from severe burnout. He was overworked, probably underpaid, dealing with the immense stress of managing these huge, complex projects. Butler thinks the madness was probably just exhaustion, or maybe a breakdown from all the local politics and intrigue. But his goal is to restore Tabbachetti's dignity. He wants us to see him as a hardworking, brilliant professional, not some raving lunatic.
So let's get to the work itself. What did Tabbachetti create that makes Butler call him the Titan of the Mountain?
His undisputed masterpiece is Chapel 36, The Journey to Calvary.
Okay, paint a picture for us.
Imagine the moment Christ is stumbling, carrying the cross up the hill to Golgotha. But again, it's not a quiet, solitary moment. It's a huge, chaotic procession. Tabbacetti sculpted 40 figures, all larger than life, and 9 horses. But the real genius, and this is the part where Butler gets so excited he can barely contain himself, is in the composition of the floor.
The floor, not the statues.
A floor, yes. See, most sculptors would just arrange their figures on a flat surface like chess pieces. Tabbacetti built a sloping, uneven floor. The ground physically rises up towards the back corner of the chapel.
So he actually terraformed the inside of the chapel.
He created what Butler calls a dynamic stage. By sloping the floor, he creates this incredible forced perspective. You can see the figures in the back clearly over the heads of the ones in the front. It creates a sense of a real crowd surging uphill. It's not static, it's moving. Butler points out that this was revolutionary. The later artists just posed their figures in a neat line. Tabbacetti made his figures climb.
And the realism is supposed to be brutal. Butler highlights some specific figures that are definitely not pleasing to a cultivated eye.
Oh, not at all. The most famous one is the Goitrad Cretan.
That is a very harsh title.
It is, but it reflects the medical reality of the region. Goiters, that swelling of the thyroid gland in the neck, were extremely common in the Alps back then because of iodine deficiency in the water. Tabbacetti didn't pretty this up. He sculpts one of the men leading Christ as this brutal-looking figure with a massive prominent goiter. It's ugly. It's uncomfortable to look at, but it's real.
And it grounds the biblical scene in the local reality. The pilgrims looking at that statue would have recognized that affliction immediately. They'd say, I know a man down the valley who looks just like that.
Exactly. It makes the sacred story immediate and local. And then there's the kicking man, a figure who is binding a bundle of rods and is caught in this moment of extreme, violent, energetic motion. Butler says Tabbacetti's figures are always acting. They're never posing for a portrait. They're caught in the middle of doing something. He calls Tabbacetti a titan because his work has this raw, muscular, unstoppable energy.
It's so interesting that for all this talk of titans and epic crowds and brutal realism, Butler's absolute favorite statue on the entire mountain is this tiny, quiet, almost hidden figure, the Vecchietto.
Ah, yes, the little man.
Tell us about him.
So we move to a different chapel, Chapel 39, which is the descent from the cross. It's a very somber scene. Christ's body is being taken down. Everyone is mourning. But standing a little bit apart from the main action, kind of in the corner, is this small, incredibly realistic statue of a peasant.
Just a local guy.
Just a local guy. He's short. He's dressed in simple 16th century clothes. And he's looking upward with what Butler describes as a holy, tranquil smile.
Which completely doesn't fit the scene.
He's a total anachronism. He's not dressed like a biblical figure. And he's not mourning. He looks peaceful, almost happy. He looks like he's watching a beautiful sunrise, not a dead body being taken down from a cross.
So what on earth is he doing there?
Butler has a brilliant theory. He thinks this statue is a portrait of a local benefactor, maybe some peasant who scraped together his life savings to help fund a chapel. And Butler suspects this statue was originally made for a completely different chapel, maybe a scene of the Ascension or something joyful, which later got destroyed or renovated.
And because the statue was just so good, so lifelike, they couldn't bear to throw it away.
Exactly. So they rescued old man Giuseppe, or whatever his name was, and they just plopped him into the back of the descent from the cross. You know, he's a lovely statue. Let's just put him in the corner over there where he won't be in the way.
I love that. It's so human and practical.
It is. But Butler is absolutely obsessed with him. He ranks this one little figure as dead-ripe art. That's his highest praise. He says it's perfect because it's completely free from affectation. It's a masterpiece of portraiture in clay, precisely because it isn't trying to be art. It's just a man. It captures the very essence of a specific, real individual with total, unblinking sincerity. For Butler, the Vecchietto is the ultimate proof that agape will always, always beat gnosis.
But like all great artistic movements, the golden age at Varallo doesn't last forever. Butler dedicates a pretty scathing section of the book to what he calls the bad art and the decline of the mountain.
Yes. After the Titan, Tabbacetti, we get the third major artist, a man named Giovanni d'Enrico. D'Enrico isn't awful. He's a very competent sculptor.
Yeah.
But for Butler, he's stagey in all the wrong ways.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think of the difference between an actor who truly inhabits a character and an actor who is just showing you that he's acting. Butler says d'Enrico's figures are always showing themselves off.
They're posing.
They're posing. They seem aware that there's an audience watching them. They're polite. They're well-behaved.
And for Butler, politeness is the death of great art.
It absolutely is. He directly compares D'Enrico's Chapel of the Nailing to the Cross with Pavicetti's work. D'Enrico arranges everyone neatly so you can see them all clearly. It's tidy, it's organized. Pavicetti was chaotic, messy, and real. Butler sees D'Enrico as the beginning of the end, that long, slow slide into academic soullessness.
And the decline he's talking about isn't just artistic, it's also physical. We have to remember, Butler is writing this in the late 1800s. These chapels are hundreds of years old. They're damp.
The physical decay is a huge part of the atmosphere he describes. He talks about the peeling paint, the thick layers of dust, and he has a particular horror for what's happened to the horsehair wigs over the centuries.
Oh, no.
He describes them as mangy. When the old glue fails and the moths get in, those once realistic wigs start to look absolutely horrifying, and he complains bitterly about the terrible restoration jobs. He says the repainted figures look like a Highlander at a tobacconist's.
You know those wooden statues that used to stand outside cigar shops? Really stiff and shiny and garish?
Exactly that. He hates the shiny new paint. He says he prefers the rot. He argues that even damaged, even with peeling paint and a mangy wig, the original work of Pavicetti is infinitely superior to the soulless, restored version.
Okay, we promised to talk about the skepticism and the humor. Because Butler isn't just an art critic, he's a brilliant observer of human nature. And he finds the whole business of the sanctuary utterly fascinating.
He really does.
Yeah.
He's especially interested in the ex-votos, the votive offerings. These are the little pictures or objects that people leave behind when a prayer has been answered. Butler loves them because they are so direct, so transactional. He calls them business-like.
It's not vague spirituality, it's like a contract.
It's a contract. You have a problem, you pray to a specific saint or chapel, the problem gets fixed, you leave a little painting as a receipt. And he collects the stories of the miracles that were associated with the statues, and there are some absolute gems in here. We have to talk about the Virgin and the Thief.
Okay, please do. This is the slapping virgin.
Yes. So there was this statue of the Virgin Mary that was, as was the custom, decked out in real jewelry donated by the faithful. A thief breaks into the chapel one night and tries to steal a ring right off her finger, and according to the legend, the statue's arm came to life and it slapped him.
Just a straight backhand to the face.
A stunning box on the ear is how the story goes. He was supposedly paralyzed with fear until the authorities came and arrested him. Now, Butler tells this story with a perfectly straight face, but his commentary is hilarious. He notes that the thief was obviously mortified. But he suggests that the statue of the Virgin looks a little mortified, too.
Why would she be mortified?
Because she had to resort to physical violence. It's such a human projection. This idea that a holy statue just lost her temper and decked a guy, it brings the divine down to a very petty human level, which Butler finds delightful.
And then there's a story that sounds like a complete fever dream, the roasted cock.
This is one of the best. This takes place in the chapel, depicting the house of Caiaphas. As a detail of realism, the scene includes a kitchen in the background. And on a spit, turning over a sculpted fire, the artist had made a roasted rooster. Plucked, cooked, ready for dinner.
A nice bit of domestic realism.
Right, until a local man named Lorenzo Tongu walks in. Lorenzo was the town drunkard. He stumbles into the chapel one night, completely wasted. And suddenly, the little clay roasted chicken stops turning. It flaps its cooked clay wings. And it speaks to him.
The cooked chicken spits.
It crows at him in the local dialect. Chu fang shankwe.
And that translates to
Drunk again today.
laughs. That is unbelievable. Imagine the guilt trip this poor guy must have been on.
Can you imagine the hallucination? A rotisserie chicken staging an intervention for your drinking problem. But Butler loves it because apparently it worked. Lorenzo never touched another drop of alcohol for the rest of his life. The story is completely absurd, but it captures the folk atmosphere of the mountain. It's a place where the barrier between statue and reality, between the dead and the living, is just paper thin.
It grounds the spiritual in the most physical way possible. It's not God is watching you, it's the chicken is watching you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he notes there was a dancing curse, too. A story of a woman who wouldn't stop dancing when the Holy Sacrament was being carried past. She was cursed to dance for 9 generations. And Butler points out with great delight that this fantastic story was verified by a document.
He just loves the bureaucracy of the supernatural.
He loves it. All these wild, unbelievable stories are backed up by official-looking paperwork. It adds to that whole fortress aspect, the church meticulously documenting its own power.
He also touches on the more commercial side of things, the pay-per-view Jesus.
Oh, yes. He quotes an earlier writer, a man named Fasola, who describes the Holy Sepulchre Chapel, Apparently, it was kept very, very dark inside. You couldn't actually see the figure of Christ in the tomb unless you put a coin in a slot.
Which would then light a candle.
Exactly. No coin, no savior. It was a spiritual marketplace. There were even lists published of the specific graces you could obtain at certain chapels. You go to Chapel 11 for sick children. You pray at Chapel 14 for rain. It was a menu of miracles. And Butler doesn't condemn this with anger. He just observes it with this kind of anthropologist's curiosity. He sees it all as part of the human ecosystem of the place.
Now, before we finish the tour, we have to mention one other location. Butler didn't just stay in Varallo. He went to another nearby sanctuary called Crea.
Yes, Crea is another one of these sacred mountains in the region. And Butler basically went there on a hunting expedition, looking for more works by his hero, Tabbachetti.
And did he find them?
He did. He found a chapel of the martyrdom of St. Eusebius, and it features another scene of that extreme, brutal realism he loves. A figure of a paralytic, another goitered figure. Butler recognizes the hand of the master in the unflinching, ugly truth of these bodies.
But the part of Crea that really showcases Butler's wit is his little theory about spotting the birth of the Virgin. This is the famous egg theory.
The egg theory is classic Butler. He gives the reader a little guide on how to identify the birth of the Virgin scene in any piece of Renaissance art. He says, first, look for the baby being washed. That's pretty standard. But the real giveaway, the absolute tell, is the mother, St. Anne.
What's she doing?
In these paintings and statues, St. Anne is always, and Butler insists, always eating an egg. Specifically, a soft-boiled egg. He says if the mother has an egg, you can be 100% certain it's the birth of the Virgin. He jokes that the artist must have decided she needed a bit of keeping up after the labor. It's such a tiny domestic detail, but Butler adores it because it shows the artists were thinking about the reality of the situation. Giving birth is exhausting. The woman needs a snack.
It's the ape again, the sincerity of that simple domestic detail.
Exactly. It's not high theology, it's breakfast.
So we've climbed the mountain, we've met the artists, we've dodged the slapping virgin, and we've learned about the importance of eggs. But Butler wrote this whole book for a bigger reason than just travel tips. He has a very strong, very specific philosophy about the lifespan of art.
He does. This is his Mortmain argument. It means the dead hand.
That sounds pretty ominous.
It's a very controversial idea, even today. Butler argues that art should not and cannot live forever. He has this incredible line. He says, crush the wounded beetle, but do not try to mend it.
Wow, that's a violent image.
It is. But he believes that when a great work of art, like the chapels at Varallo, starts to naturally decay, we should have the courage to let it die. If we try to restore it, if we repaint the faces and fix the broken fingers and replace the old wigs with new ones, we inevitably kill the spirit of it. We turn it into a lie. We impose our modern, slick gnosis onto the ancient, sincere agape.
So he would rather see a beautiful, rotting masterpiece than a perfectly restored fake.
Absolutely. He believes there is a dignity in decay. The peeling paint tells the story of the passage of time. The mangy wig shows the history of the object itself. To scrape all that away and paint it bright pink is, for him, a profound insult to the original artist. He says we should let these great works fade away rather than restoring them into a state of soullessness.
That's a powerful idea. It really challenges our modern obsession with preservation. We want to keep everything forever in perfect condition, and Butler is saying, no, let it go.
Because life is fleeting, and art should be allowed to be too.
So, as we close the book on Ex Voto and our tour of Varallo, what's the final thought? What does Butler leave us with about this intersection of belief in art and skepticism?
I think Butler leaves us with a really provocative question about what we mean by truth. He spends the whole book gleefully mocking the letter of the religion. The magic bird song, the miraculous stone, the talking chicken. He knows those are just fables.
Right, he's a total skeptic about the supernatural part.
Completely. But he suggests that if you strip all of that away, if you admit the miracles are just stage tricks and folk tales, the art itself actually becomes more powerful, not less.
How does that work?
Because it stops being a testament to divine magic and becomes a testament to human sincerity. It's no longer about a miracle coming down from the sky. It's about the miracle of the human beings who built this incredible thing up from the mud. The spirit of the place, the agape, it remains even when the dogma falls apart. The Sacro Monte becomes this incredible monument to how badly people wanted to believe and how hard they were willing to work to make that belief visible and tangible.
So the awe shifts. It shifts from God to humanity.
Exactly. Even if you're a complete atheist, even if you share every ounce of Butler skepticism, you can stand in front of Tabachetti's chaotic crowd and you can weep. Not because of the theology, but because of the raw, messy, powerful humanity of it all. The grotesque art of Varallo stops being a failed attempt at reality and becomes a stunningly successful expression of who we really are. Goiters, warts, hopes, fears, and all.
That is a beautiful place to end it. It turns out that art made of painted mud can sometimes tell us more about ourselves than perfect white marble ever could.
Sincerity over perfection. Every single time.
Well, next time I'm in Italy, I think I'm skipping the Colosseum. I'm buying a good pair of hiking boots and heading for that terracotta crowd in the Alps.
Just watch out for the chickens.
Always. Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. We'll see you on the next deep dive.